It's easy for us to say that analytical essays should be set up like this, and I know that some of you are maybe a little more visual than auditory, so I'm going to use this video to take you through how I would structure an analytical essay and how I would incorporate evidence into that analytical essay. As we've already talked about, we have this four-part structure to an academic essay. We have our introduction, which houses our thesis statement. We have a background information section. We go to the main points, and that should be the star of your paper. And finally, we go to the conclusion where we answer those important so what, who cares questions. And that leads us into my paper, which is Of Monsters and Men, a Marxist reading of Disney Pixar's Monsters Incorporated. At the very outset, I need an introduction and a thesis statement to tell you, the reader, in this case the listener, what exactly I'm trying to do. So first and foremost, what text are you trying to discuss? This might be the place to provide a brief summary of the text. You don't need to spend 3 or 4 paragraphs just summarizing things. Try to summarize your text in maybe a paragraph. And if you're using a literary criticism like psychoanalytic criticism or gender criticism, this is the place where you're going to mention, I will be using this style of criticism. So if you use that criticism, your thesis statement is going to be what your interpretation is. So by applying this literary criticism to this text, it shows us that here is my interpretation. And of course, I already said that I was going to be working with Monsters Incorporated. I'm going to be using Marxist criticism to look at this. So here is my thesis statement. Monsters Incorporated displays a Marxist class distinction between the proletariat worker monsters and the bourgeoisie factory owner monsters. Now, I've told you what my main point is throughout the entire essay, so I can move forward into the background information. So I have to set up a lens for you. This background information is mostly going to be me talking about Marxist criticism and what it means. So if I need to tell you about Marxist criticism, of course, it's based off of this guy, Karl Marx, who spent a lot of his philosophy showing the distinctions and the struggles between different classes in society. And he mostly focuses on 2 groups, the proletariat, who are the working class people, and the bourgeoisie, who he says control the means of production. These are factory owners. These are the owners of companies who exploit the labor of the proletariat. Now, to go along with this, I also have to give you some evidence. So here are a couple of direct quotes that I would like to use in my work. I feel like they would be best to use together. I'm going to try and combine these into a single paragraph here because they're basically talking about the same thing. So again, I want to use a direct quote here, but I have to use the right paragraph structure. And a paragraph always starts with a topic sentence. Then I introduce the evidence. I use and cite the evidence. I explain that evidence in my own words and how that evidence reinforces my point. And then that kind of follows into the concluding sentence and the transition to our next paragraph. So here is my paragraph, and if you want to pause this video and look through the entire thing first, I would highly suggest it. And here is my topic sentence highlighted at the very beginning. Marxist criticism seeks to highlight class distinctions in a text. Next, I have to introduce my evidence. So I use both of those authors' names as I set up those individual quotes. I use those quotes and I cite them. Now comes the bigger part of where I explain these quotes in my own words for the reader, because I can't just give these to the reader and say, all right, here's the evidence, figure it out. I have to explain, here is what I see in these quotes, and here's how it proves my idea. So now I'm done with the background information. I can move to my analysis and I can start actually talking about the movie. So, we said that the bourgeoisie were the factory owners, and Mr. Waternoose, this character in the film, is the fifth generation owner of Monsters Incorporated. And we would say that he controls the means of production. He is the one who owns all the equipment, all of the factory materials used by the proletariat. And it's an important distinction to make here that white-collar employees at Monsters Incorporated wear clothes. So he's wearing a suit jacket, he's wearing a waistcoat, he's wearing a button-up shirt with cufflinks at the cuffs, and he's also wearing a bow tie. So this very clearly delineates him as a bourgeoisie monster. On the other hand, we have proletariat monsters. We have Sully down below in blue. We have Randall up top in purple. These are scarer monsters. So they're basically workers on the factory floor at Monsters Incorporated. And Mike Wazowski is off to the left-hand side. He's green. But notice that they aren't wearing clothes unless it's typical clothes of like safety goggles or hard hats that we would see blue-collar workers wearing. Now, wouldn't you know it? It was the factory owner all along. He was the main antagonist of the movie, and he is taken away by the police. That means that the bourgeoisie of Monsters Incorporated, the person who owns the means of production, has been eliminated, and now we just have proletariat monsters standing here thinking, okay, well, we're all out of a job because we don't have a bourgeoisie anymore. And notice that none of these monsters are wearing clothes except for hard hats. So again, these are blue-collar proletariat monsters. By the end of the movie, Sully steps in to take over control of Monsters Incorporated, the entire company. Notice what's on his neck. He is wearing a necktie. Does this now mean that Sully, like Mr. Waternoose, has become the bourgeoisie? Now this all leads me to my conclusion and my so what and who cares. If Sully has taken over as the bourgeoisie, the actual structure of Monstropolis hasn't actually changed. We still have a bourgeoisie, Sully, and we still have a proletariat blue-collar working class who works for Sully as the bourgeoisie. There's still a product. Instead of scaring people, now they are making kids laugh, and that fuels Monstropolis. There's still a product, though, that the workers must produce. And that leads us to this very big question. For a capitalist society to function, do we have to have a bourgeoisie to function? Do we have to have a ruling class? Do we have to have oppressors for the rest of society to function? And if that is the case, if we do have to have a bourgeoisie class, what is that teaching the children who watch this movie? Of course, I used 2 sources about Marxist criticism, so I have to cite them here in my works cited page. I also used the movie, so I have to cite the movie too. Now, looking at this slideshow, I only had 1 slide for my introduction and thesis statement. I had 2 slides for Marxist criticism to explain Marxist criticism and the different terms. I had 4 slides for the analysis and only 1 slide for the so what, who cares. So really the biggest part of this is the analysis, and that's where I want to see you put the most effort into your paper, really building up your analysis to prove your interpretation is valid.